Hi guys, welcome to Piscator UK fishing channel. What I'm going to do in this video guys is share with you my top 5 fishing knots that I use. I'm going to share how to tie these knots and the reasons that I use these knots for both sea fishing and freshwater fishing. Let's get started. Right guys, the first knot in the top 5 is the Palomar knot. Now, the Palomar knot can be used on braid, mono, fluorocarbon, and some people use the Palomar knot when using or tying a drop shot knot. But my main uses for tying the Palomar knot is tying your mainline braid to terminal tackle such as swivels, wire traces when fishing for pike, etc. And the reason that I like the Palomar knot so much is it's strong, it's got a low profile, and it doesn't slip when using braid, and it's easy. So before you tie your Palomar knot, just double your mainline braid if it's on your main line, and roughly got about 10 inches of doubled loop. Feed the eye of your doubled over loop through your terminal tackle, in this case a snap swivel. Pull that through 4 to 5 inches. Then what you want to do is do an overhand knot. Simple overhand knot. And the final part to tying the knot is whatever you're tying on, whether it be a wire trace or swivel to your main line, is take your terminal tackle, feed it through the loop eye, and at this stage, once you've fed it through the loop of the eye, you just want to keep a little bit of tension on your knot, keeping the turns as neat as possible, which will prevent friction on the line when tightening up, plus it makes for a neater knot. So just ease that down until the knot goes as small as it can. Now take your main line end and pull that down towards your terminal tackle, making sure that the loop doesn't go over the eye of whatever you're tying on, whether it be a hook, swivel, etc. Get it to about that stage, wet it. Wetting the knot is really important to prevent as much friction as possible when tightening up on your knot. Tag end, pull, main line, pull, and really cinch down on the knot to prevent slipping on both the main line end and your tag end. That's a Palomar knot complete, and all you need to do now is trim your tag end. I normally leave about 2mm of my tag end, which just allows, just in case you haven't tightened up on the knot enough, that'll allow for a little bit of slippage and your knot will only get tighter. Tag end trimmed, and that's a Palomar knot, guys. Really simple, easy, strong, and it's a knot that won't let you down when tied properly. The second knot in my top 5 is a uni knot. the single uni knot. Now, the single uni knot is really popular amongst other anglers, and the reason it's so popular is because of its strength, especially when tied with mono or fluorocarbon. The applications I would use the single uni knot is when I'm using fluorocarbon or mono and I'm tying direct to my hooks or other mainline tackles such as swivels. Now I'll go as far as to say that the single uni knot when using mono or fluorocarbon is one of the strongest knots. In my opinion, and I would go as far as to say, and in my experience, the knot is stronger than the line that you're actually tying it with. Let's get on and tie the single uni knot. So in this situation, just say I'm tying my snood length for say a 2 hook flapper, 3 hook flapper, 1 up, 1 down. I would use a uni knot. First, take your tag end and thread it through the eye of your swivel or whatever it is that you're actually tying with your mono or fluorocarbon. Take about 6 or 7 inches of tag end and just narrow the loop and grab it with your thumb and forefinger of your opposite hand. Now with your tag end, make a loop and lay it over the loop that you've just made. Now the tag end, grip that in your thumb and forefinger of your opposite hand so it gets it out of the way. Now take your tag end and you want to wrap it over and through both your running line and the top of your loop that you just made. That's 1, 2, 3. Now in most applications, 3 turns is more than sufficient to hold your hook or swivel in place and to give you a really strong knot. A rule of thumb that I use is if I'm fishing under 10 pound break and strain, I will use 4 loops. So pull on your tag end, not too tight that you're cinching it down, and then take your main line or running line and pull the knot down towards your hook or swivel. Once you get back down to this stage, just cinch up again on your knot, but not too tight as if you're locking it in place, and pull on your main line or running line again and slide the knot down to your hook eye or swivel eye. Now at this stage you're ready to cinch down on the knot, and what I'd always recommend when using mono or fluorocarbon and even braid is to moisten your knot. When your knot's moistened, you can then cinch down on your running line, pulling it tight as you can, and you don't need to cinch down on your tag end because the way it works, as in the single uni knot, as it locks in place when you pull on your main line or running line. So just give that a good cinch down and that's the knot done. Trim off your tag end. I normally leave 2 or 3 mil of tag end for safety, and that's your single uni knot. As I said, I would use this normally when using mono or fluorocarbon tying direct to my hooks or swivels on my terminal tackle. Now the third knot in my top 5 is the half blood knot. And again, the half blood knot is really popular amongst anglers, especially beginners, and it's probably the first knot that most beginners would learn to tie. Now the reason I would use a half blood knot is when I'm fishing direct mono or fluorocarbon from a reel directly to a lure. Now as I said in the previous knot, being the single uni knot, the single uni knot is really strong, and in most cases the knot is actually stronger than the line that you're tying it with. So if I was using direct mono or fluorocarbon direct to my lure, then I would use a different knot than a uni knot because I wouldn't want my line to break anywhere else except at my lure. So for that reason, I would use something like the half-blood knot. Now there is many variations out there of a half-blood knot, and there's little tweaks you can do to improve it, strengthen it, and I'll probably go through them directly after doing this knot as a little bonus. So let's tie the half-blood knot. So tying the half-blood knot is really simple. First take your tag end and thread it through the eye of your hook or swivel. Again, take about 6 or 7 inches tag end through the eye of your hook, and at this stage you just want to grab your line and hook at the eye with your fourth finger and thumb. Now taking your tag end, you want to do a minimum of 4 turns depending on the thickness of your line. And then take your tag end and thread it through the loop that you made going through the eye of your hook. And grab with your fourth finger and thumb. Now at this stage you just want to pull on your main line or running line, and at the same time keeping hold of your tag end and slide the knot down towards the eye of your hook. Now before you get to cinching the knot, again with fluorocarbon or mono and indeed braid, you want to moisten your knot with either water or saliva. Once your knot's moistened, you can then cinch down fully on your knot. And once you're happy, snip the tag end. Again, 2 or 3 millimeters of tag end. Now the reason that there's many variations of the half-blood knot is because the half-blood knot has got a tendency to slip. Now with a blood knot, it depends how many turns you're going to do. I would say it depends on the thickness of your line that you're using. If you're using a thicker line, say 20 pound and upwards, then 4 or 5 turns is usually enough. If I was using thinner line, say between 20 pounds down to 2 pound, I would use between 5 and 6 turns on my blood knot, on my half blood knot. Now there's some variations out there of the half blood knot, and some of them are really good. So what I'm going to do now is just share with you another variation of the half blood knot, and it's another very popular knot. I'm not actually sure if it has a name, but it starts off the exact same way as a half blood knot. So this next knot is a variation of the half blood knot, and it starts off exactly the same way as a half blood knot. First take your tag end and thread it through the eye of your hook or swivel, whatever it is that you're making. Again, take 6 or 7 inches tag end through the eye of your hook. Grab your loop and the eye of your hook with your thumb and forefinger of your opposite hand. Now instead of doing 4, 5, 6 turns with this variation, I'm only going to do 3 turns, and I would only ever do 3 turns on no matter what the breaking strain of line. Take 1 turn, 2 turns, 3 turns. Take your tag end and again put it through the loop that you made going through the eye of your hook and pull down so you have a little loop. And as you can see, the tag end is going through the loop that you made, that you're grabbing with your thumb and forefinger. Now if you were to pull on this would be a half blood knot, but you'd only be taking 3 turns. And 3 turns for a half blood knot is not sufficient to hold it in place. And if you were doing that, again, I would recommend doing at least 4 or 5 turns. And if you're using really light line, 5 or 6 turns. So this variation is you take your tag end and you go back through the loop that you've made, and you do that 3 times again. Once, twice, 3 times. So you end up with something like that. Now at this stage, you just pull down on both lines slightly and pull on your tag end at the same time, and the knot will move up your line. Now at this stage you want to just ease the knot down towards the eye of your hook or swivel by pulling on your main line or running line until it reaches the eye of your hook. At this stage you're almost ready to cinch on the knot, and I would once again recommend you moisten the knot with saliva or water. Pull on your main line and you have a really nice compact little knot. It almost looks like a grinner knot. And again, trim your tag end. And that's a variation of the half-blood knot. This knot is again really popular with anglers, especially if you're making rigs. And it's one of the knots I use when I'm making rigs when using mono or fluorocarbon. Now my fourth knot in my top 5 knots that I use is the non-slip loop knot. Now I don't use this knot all the time, but it's a really good knot to know, and the times I would use this knot is when I'm fishing, say, a weighted fly. In this case it's a weighted sea fly, and the reason that anglers use the non-slip loop knot is because it adds additional articulation to your lure or fly. Now if this line was hard tied to the fly, it would normally follow the line that it comes off, i.e. in a certain direction. But because you have a loop knot, it allows additional articulation and movement into your lure or fly by moving up and down, and it doesn't necessarily follow your main line that it's tied to because of the loop. So that's one of the applications, which is a sea fly. My second application I may use this is in the cheb rig. Now again, you know, as you jig this, it's going to go up and it's going to fall, but it's not going to necessarily follow the main line that it's tied to because it has that additional articulation. And the third reason I may use this is on a small crankbait. Now again, instead of following your main line, if it was hard tied to the eye of your lure, the loop in the knot gives your lure a sort of mind of its own, and it will not necessarily follow your main line, either diving or coming up, etc. Now this little knot, as I said, is in my top 5 because the knot you tie could mean the main difference between catching fish or not catching fish, and because the loop gives your lure that additional articulation that you would normally not get if you were hard tied to, say, the eye of your lure or fly or cheb rig, etc. And it's just worth having in your back pocket sometimes. So let's get on and tie the non-slip loop knot. So the non-slip loop knot, in this case I'm going to use heavier line and quite a large hook for demonstration purposes. Firstly, take your tag end and tie an overhand knot. And you want to leave yourself a good 5 or 6 inches of tag end. Now, thread your tag end through the eye of your hook or lure or fly or whatever it is you're going to be tying on. Take your tag end and pull your line down so that the overhand knot is closer to the eye of your hook. Then take your tag end and go back through the same way as your line goes through the knot. And at this stage you can pull down slightly to make your overhand knot slightly smaller. what you want to do at this stage is pull on your tag end so that the knot, your overhand knot, goes slightly closer to the eye of your hook or fly or whatever it is you're tying, and pinch it with your forefinger and thumb of your opposite hand. Again, I'll just give you another look before I do the additional turns. You take your tag end and go round your main line or running line. It doesn't matter which way you do this, whether it's clockwise, anti-clockwise, and do it 4 or 5 times depending on the thickness of your line. In this case, I'll go round 4 times, and then again I want to go back through the overhand knot, through the eye of the overhand knot, and at this stage you've got 3 of the lines going through the overhand knot exactly the same way. What you want to do at this stage is just start cinching down on the knot, pull in your main line or running line and the tag end of your knot. Until you get to almost tight. And again, with all knots, use a little bit of lubrication such as saliva or water, and you want to cinch down on your knot. And pull on your main line as tight as you can. Again, pull on your tag end. And that is your non-slip loop knot. As I said, not always used in everything I do, but it's just good to have in your back pocket, which adds additional articulation to your lure or fly. Trim your tag end, leaving 2 or 3 millimeters, and there you have your loop knot. My 5th knot in my top 5 knots is the drop shot knot. Now you can use the drop shot knot for freshwater and sea fishing, and I was toying between my number 5 knot to be an FG knot or the drop shot knot, but I felt the FG knot needs a little bit more explaining and it takes a little bit more time to make, so I thought I would use my number 5 knot as the drop shot knot. This is how to tie it. For tying a drop shot knot, take a length of mono or fluorocarbon, and I use a minimum of 3 feet length for my drop shot knot. And the reason I have a minimum of 3 feet is your hook is roughly in the middle of that 3 feet length. In this demonstration, I'm using the heavier line for visual purposes. Normally I'll be using, anything from 4 pound to 15 pound for drop shotting. Firstly, take your tag end and thread it through your eye of your hook. You want to get your hook into the middle of your 3 foot length or whatever length it is you choose to use. Once you feel that the hook's in the middle of that length, you want to create a loop. Now some people do this in a couple of ways. Some people do the twists from the top just on its own by twisting around as so, and then they would put the hook through the loop. This is the way I do it. Make your loop, take your hook up to the top of the loop, and holding both lines, you want to turn your hook, making the twists in your line. Now, some people only use a minimum of 3 twists in the line, but I've lost good fish by only using 3 twists in the line because the hook slips if you do any less than 3 turns. So I do a minimum of 5 turns. But because I'm using heavy line, if I do more than 3 turns on this heavier line for visual demonstration, I'm not going to be able to pull the knot tight together and you won't see the proper end result. So as I said, I do a minimum of 5 turns on any breaking strain that I use, whether it be 4 pound or whether it be 15 pound. I do a minimum of 5 turns. And 5 turns is usually what I would use. So take your hook and holding both lines together, you want to turn it and twist it around the top of your loop. That's twice, and that's 3 times. Now at this stage, I put the bend of my hook in my mouth to hold it in place and moisten the twists and pull on the tag end and on your main line end, like so. Now the line's been moistened, and at this stage I just tighten up on the hook so that the twists is on either side of the hook. Like so. Now some people use the Palomar knot when doing a drop shot knot, and the Palomar knot's fine. However, the reason I use the twisted loops is I find that the twisted loops keeps the presentation of the hook in position for much longer. Palomar knot, after a while of fishing, the hook tends to sag and drop, and you don't get that horizontal presentation. So that's the reason I use the twisted loop knot for the drop shot knot. I'm going to tie this once more with line that I would normally use, as the thicker line is not sitting properly and you can't really get a good idea of how the hook should sit. This time I'm using a thinner diameter line, and you'll see the hook sit more proudly by using this diameter. You'll notice on the hook that it has got a slight bend, so it's only going to stay as horizontal as sort of that position in the nature of the bend of the hook, but that is still sufficient to catch fish. It's just the design of the hook rather than a flat eye, which would sit more like that. Thread your hook onto the line and making sure you're in the middle of your 3 foot length, if 3 foot is your chosen length of line. Make your loop. Take the hook up to the top of the loop and holding both lines at the top of the loop, twist your hook round. And as I said, now that this is the proper thickness of line, I'm going to do this 5 times. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm just going to tighten up on the twists, not all the way, just bringing it together to about that stage. Now I'm going to wet the line and pull it together. As you can see, presentation of the thinner line is much better than the thicker line. Got a really neat knot, and that's a drop shot hook. That's the end of my 5 knots, guys. If you've got any comments on any of the knots, and if you find that you use different knots for different methods, or the same methods but use different knots that I'm using, then leave a comment below. And if you've got any easier ways of tying the knots, again, leave a comment below. I hope this was interesting, guys, and thanks very much for watching.